2 weeks ago, we got to the Civil War, and basically the Civil War left the whole South, including Hampden-Sydney, in trouble. Hampden-Sydney, interestingly enough, was in less trouble than most people were. This slide on the board is just for your amusement, basically, but it's a quote from an alumnus who was in the class of 1869, and he entered as a sophomore. You could get AP. He entered as a sophomore in 1866. And as you'll see reading that, at one point when he got there, there was only one other sophomore who had been a freshman the previous year. That's what attrition was like. But the 1865-66 school year was a disaster. There were only 35 students here, down from 135 in 1858, I think, a couple years before the war. And basically, you remember about the family scholarships, the $100 ones that were good for 20 years or until your last kid graduated, and then the $500 ones, which were good forever. And they had been, they sold the $100 ones for a few years and quit and put their emphasis on the $500 ones. And the earliest $100 ones would have been running out. They started in 1848, so the earliest $100 ones would have run out in 1868. But hey, we got another year or two, and basically they got from 35 back up to 53 for the school year 66, 67. And by 1870, two good things happened. One is they were back up to 70 couple enrollment. And the other thing was that the war, because of the pressures it put on staffing, the war had forced them to close the grammar school. And there were one or two private schools opening up, but Virginia was about to put in public schools, at which point Hampden-Sydney could reliably stop doing that. But in fact, it did stop doing it, and the 70 few students that they had in 1870 were all taking the college sequence of courses. So this is a good thing. The family scholarships basically kept Hampden-Sydney going, but what happened as well, the North had a huge financial surge immediately after the war was over. The South took about 10 years to glue everything back together. And then in the 1880s, prosperity came to the South, and everybody started going to college. And because that was how you got to do new things, and it was clear that you were not going to farm the way you always had. And as witness Miss Bessie's four brothers, who spread out all over the South to cities to get a job because they were through farming. And Hampden-Sydney prospered from this. And this being sort of the rock bottom year. But as the attendance went up, and the grammar school, which tended to have more local live at home and come in for class, day students come in for class, as that disappeared, there was more and more pressure on housing. Remember, the college, Cushing, had classes in the middle and dormitories on the outside, and there were 76 beds in Cushing. And if you got 80 students, it's just fine. You can park 4 of them out in the community somewhere. But if you get to 90 or 100, you got a real problem with putting people up, because Hampden-Sydney had exactly one building, Cushing, that was dormitory space. And the middle of that was all taken up with classes. And come on. Yeah, we can back up from him. No, we can't. All right. That's the next president, who comes in 1883 and is president until 1904, so 21 years. And McElwain, for whom the building he put up was eventually named, was a really good president at something that he does not get any credit for. Hampden-Sydney has had three definitions of the faculty. Initially, it was 1775 initially, the big initially. It was people who had at least been to college, and that was not a big group, but if it was at all possible, it would be somebody who had had a year's study beyond that, so they kind of knew that these courses didn't just stop your senior year. And the way you did that staffing was by hiring Presbyterian preachers. So that's what they did. For 40 years, every faculty member was an ordained Presbyterian minister. And since they were hired because they had had the standard college curriculum with all of the courses, they could obviously teach all of the courses. And their duties were defined in terms of somebody handling the freshmen, and somebody else handling the sophomores, and a third person handling the juniors, and the president did the seniors. And that was how this was. And there was no identification of the faculty with a intellectual specialty. Whoops. And that lasted until Cushing got here. To be fair, it may have been James Madison's idea, but I can't prove that. And Cushing is certainly the one who carried it out. Cushing converted the faculty into the professor of natural history and chemistry, the professor of languages, which meant Latin and Greek. Sorry to you people taking French. And the professor of mathematics. And these would be filled by people who jolly well had done that stuff and knew what was going on. There was still not a great deal of graduate study going on at American universities. And so you couldn't hire somebody who had a master's in mathematics to teach your mathematics, but at least you could get somebody who had sort of specialized in mathematics and like that. And this lasted from Cushing's time, 1820s, until McElwain got here. McElwain was not appointed because of his intellectual qualifications. He was a Presbyterian preacher, you know. Hey, that's what we do. But I can't remember, did I tell you about the stockbroker in Petersburg who wouldn't let the college sell all its bonds and turn them into Confederate bonds? Yes. Okay, well, this is his son. And Daddy had been a financial genius. And the board thought Richard would too. And so they appointed him to run to be the principal agent for the sale of $500 scholarships. And he was smart and he was good at some things, but he was not good at raising money. And they sold a few, but since selling a lot would have sort of been a disaster in terms of staffing, it's just, well, he didn't sell too many of them. But he did that before he was president, and they were satisfied enough with his performance. And look, he's got to be good at money, okay? Because think about Dad. Oops. But they appointed him president, and in his opening speech to the student body and the faculty, he laid out a plan of improvement for the college, and things were going to get better. And in particular, the college, meaning Cushing building, which had never had any form of lighting. You had a kerosene lantern in your room, you studied by that at night, or you burned candles. Those were your options. The college is going to have either gas or electric lights, he said, out loud, where everybody could hear him. And the students knew about gas lights because Richmond had gas lights. It's only 4 years since Edison patented the light bulb. So offering to make Cushing electric was definitely a long-range project, and McElwain never managed it, okay? But he did promise gas lights, which was a realistic thing to think about. But this was something we were going to do just as soon as we get around to it. And he started working on the worst problem first, which was having dormitory rooms. And go on. What he did was to plan to build a new building which would replace the academic part of the college in the middle, and the 76 beds would go up to 100 or 110, something like that, and then we would have this academic building. And the organization of this was just badly done, and it was McElwain's fault. After the Chicago fire, a Chicago architect, Henry Richardson, designed headlines by inventing a new style of building, which would either be stone or brick, and it looked very heavy, and it was called Richardson Romanesque. And everybody thought that was a sensational, new, different, non-European design. And in the Northeast, down about as far south as Hampden-Sydney, the fame for this lasted from the mid-1870s to about the mid-1880s. And we were right at the tail end of it, and people were stopping this. But this is a Richard Romanesque building. Look at the huge, heavy brick arch over the main entrance. My feeling about this is, apart from the fact that it's a total mismatch to every other building on the campus, that this is a candidate for the ugliest brick building ever devised. Truly. It also didn't have any interior design advantages, because what they did, there's 3 floors here, okay? And this is just like, come on, there we are. This is just like the middle of Cushing. Remember, this is a slide I showed you before, and that second floor was just one big chemistry lab. Well, what was down here on the ground floor was a chapel, which was okay until you could seat about 75 people in there, which was okay because that's how many beds there are in the regions, and we can get the whole student body in there for chapel and assemblies. But once you got 135 students, which they had, they won't fit in that chapel anymore. So we need a bigger chapel. Okay, thank you. And what we have had before is the chapel on the ground floor, so we'll just do that again. And the whole ground floor was a chapel. Thank you. The floor above that was where we had chemistry and natural science. And we'll do that again, except it'll be a bigger space now. And that's what that was. And on the top, come on, back up, damn you. Okay, on the top, those substantial windows on the third floor in the attic, those were the debate societies. And you need to realize that Hampden-Sydney has the oldest college debate society in continuous session. We got the third oldest, but the others have shut down for a while and started up again. And we had two. And we did not have fraternities, which were coming in the 1880s. They were just beginning to get here. But up to that point, freshmen basically picked between the Union Society and the Philanthropic Society, and they were pretty much indistinguishable. If you had 80 students, there were going to be about 40 in each group. And the thing that led people to join this was there were dues, but they weren't heavy dues. But the dues all went into buying books. And the college had tried to have a library, sort of. They hadn't tried very hard. But they had bought a few books and put them in a dorm room in Cushing, in the college. But they had no librarian. And if the door stays locked, then you can't use the books, so the door was unlocked. And that meant that the books went and disappeared. The two debate societies took their dues and bought books. And each society had about 1,500 books, which had been chosen by students to be the most possible help in courses that the college taught, okay? And so they let people use cross libraries, and so there's duplication, of course, but you had access to maybe 2,500 books, which was a weak library by the standards of 1860, let alone 1880, but not totally embarrassing. What the college had was totally embarrassing. And so it was important, and the college knew that, and it was important to the college to keep these debate societies up and running in nice facilities that would lead everybody to come in and pay the dues and buy more books, and we'll keep the books up there too. And so all those dorm room windows up there are to the two nice rooms that they put in the attic for the debate societies, and they were where the libraries were. No, the college still had no library, no building all library, and no room. They gave up on having a room called the library in Cushing, or the college. So what they did was replicate the middle of Cushing, just bigger. There were more square feet for each of these three things that were going on, because the societies had the dorm rooms at the top on the third floor. So, okay, we did it exactly the same. We did not think about how needs might have changed. And one of the things this meant was that you had the science floor in the middle here was set up to do chemistry labs and natural philosophy labs, which meant physics. What's missing from that sentence? There's no biology. The college, every now and then, when students demand it, the college will offer a course in introductory biology and tell the chemist he has to teach it. Okay, I'm sorry, this is not how you do this. And McElwain was sensitive to this. From 1855, well, in 1853, the class of 1853, Lewis Little Page Holliday had graduated with an interest in chemistry, and he went to UVA and took their most demanding master's degree in basically chemistry, and then came back here in 1855 to teach. And he taught all of the science that was taught, chemistry, natural philosophy, and when they demanded biology, he did that until 1890. And he helped to design the new building, Memorial Hall. But his ideas were fixed on what we're doing now, and he helped do this the same way it had been done. But McElwain was seeing to it that the second change, the third pattern of faculty specialties was about to come in. What McElwain did was to insist on an advanced degree in the subject you were going to teach here. That sounds like what Cushing was doing, except Cushing, because you couldn't get the people, just wanted a demonstrated interest in it. You didn't have to have an advanced degree. McElwain not only insisted on an advanced degree, but when an opening showed up in the faculty, he wrote letters to UVA, Johns Hopkins, Princeton, Yale, and somebody else. Not Maryland. Anyway, the best research graduate schools in the eastern United States, and said, who have you got that might look good on our faculty? And the salaries are terrible, and he managed to hire them anyway. And he understood that this was a two-way street. So he went through the graduating students every year and picked out the ones who were pretty good at what they did and told them that they really ought to be going to graduate school. And they did go to graduate school. In particular, the ones who were interested in medicine, some of them went to UVA, but the vast majority of them, well, a bunch of them went to MCV as well, but a huge number went to Johns Hopkins, which is like a pretty good place to go to med school, okay? And there were much more going to Johns Hopkins for physics and chemistry studies. And this reached a stage at which in the 1890s, for several years, the Hampden-Sydney Alumni Association had a chapter on the Johns Hopkins campus, which kind of has class. Anyway, he was feeding students in, and they were getting degrees and going off and doing what PhDs in physics and chemistry do and what doctors do. But they recognized that it was a good idea to help Hampden-Sydney out with this. And so, well, some of you know that what is called Brinkley now used to be called Winston. And Winston was a chemist here for 50 years, from 1899 to 1949. And he had been in the class of 94, went to Johns Hopkins, got a master's degree in chemistry, and came back in 99. And pretty much at the same time, where we're sitting right now is where Bagby Hall used to be the science building. We'll get to that. But Bagby Hall was named for Professor Bagby, who had gone to Johns Hopkins and gotten a PhD in basically in physics, and came to Hampden-Sydney to teach. And this is a third level of faculty intellectual performance. First you do this with Presbyterian preachers, then you do it with people who are interested in classics or interested in chemistry, but there's not enough graduate education in the country to be able to let you have that as a requirement. Then what McElwain puts in is a system where you will have an advanced degree to get a teaching contract here. And for a while they would go along with master's degrees, but for the last 50 years it's been much harder to get a teaching job here with a master's degree. It works in fine arts and things like that, but the McElwain is basically responsible for that. And what he did was to get this building built, and the middle of Cushing pretty much gutted and turned into a dormitory. And this building, in its Richardson Romanesque splendor, Baltimore was a big center for Romanesque architecture for some reason. They had three or four people there who had national recognition as Richardson Romanesque designers, which meant if you went to Baltimore architect, you were going to get this kind of thing handed to you. And for some reason, we went to a Baltimore architect. I don't know which one, and I don't know who made that decision, but it did pretty much guarantee that we built this thing. And it was this is the front. The back of this was facing College Road, and it was very close to College Road. And it faced what is now the leadership building. I don't know what that has a name, but I don't know what it is. But it was, that's where it was. And it was okay for 10 or 15 years, but it was badly built. An alumnus who was a contractor in somewhere, Petersburg, I think, east of here anyway, got the contract, and he did things the cheapest he possibly could, which probably included cheating on the contract some places. But the stairs, you went up the stairs to go, okay? And the stairs were slabs of slate, which is pretty nice. It's not dusty and it works very well, but you have to be very careful. Slate has a grain to it, and you have to get the grain absolutely horizontal. If you buy cheaper slate, it will have been cut so that the grain is angled slightly. And at this point, with hundreds of people going up and down it every day for about 10 years, the grain splits and you get a very sharp piece curling up like this. And people get assassinated in their ankles by this. And the stairs, the stairwells all had several stairs that had done this, and this is not a good way to keep morale up. And there were several other things that had been just badly done. And so in only 15 years, from the time they opened it in 1892, in only 15 years, there was a committee quietly considering ways to replace the Memorial Hall. It didn't go anywhere for a while, but we'll get back to what they did do. But one of the things that happened almost immediately, that when they first started using it, 1890, it may have been actually, it may have opened in 1890, but the students noticed that Louis Little Page Holliday had died suddenly, and somebody new, hired by McElwain's instincts, was teaching chemistry. I can't find out who it was, but he objected that you couldn't use Bunsen burners. There was no gas in the laboratories. And this was, if you're going to have a modern chemistry course, you've got to have Bunsen burners. I'm sorry. This has to be done. And he started agitating for a gas generating plant and gas plumbing to be put in Memorial Hall. And the students heard about this, and at least some of them had heard about the speech in which the president had promised to put gas in the college, Cushing Hall. And they started pressuring too, and so the board gave up and bought a acetylene gas generating plant. You could buy these things as a box that sat in the ground like the emergency charger for your electric system. And the trouble with it, well, there's several problems with it. One of them is that the way you make acetylene is by taking solid white calcium carbide, which is little granules, so you shovel it like sand or something, and you drip water on it slowly. And the faster you drip water on, the more it chemically decomposes into acetylene and slacked lime, which is an extremely alkaline, sludgy, slimy, messy product. And if you're going to do this for the laboratories in Memorial Hall, plus all of the lights in the dorm rooms, and you can say, okay, we're going to turn these out at 10 o'clock or something, but still, you have to have a fairly big acetylene generating system. And this meant somebody had to tend to it. And the way they tended to it, come on. We need to, this is where we change gears a little bit, but not really. I got enough time here. There are two people you need to know about for this story. One of them is Dr. Gilmer, for whom Gilmer Hall is named, and this is a picture of him when he was a young faculty member, but he attended here. And the first year he was here was 1916, and he went off to the Army, came back, graduated in 1924, went off to graduate school and was in physics, and was Dr. Baggett was still teaching the physics course, but he was in bad health. And the college wrote him and asked him to come back and be the backup physics person, which he did. And he didn't get his PhD until 1937, poor devil, but there you are. He was a very loyal Hampden-Sydney alumnus. But when he was much younger, he looked like that. When I knew him, he looked a lot older than that, but I dug this picture out. The other person you have to know about is B.S. Oliver. You do not understand anything really about Hampden-Sydney history if you don't know about B.S. Oliver. In 1889, the college hired B.S. to be the college carpenter, which meant that he was the one sole person who had no teaching responsibilities. If anything went wrong, he was supposed to fix it. And there was no budget for this, so he had to think up ways to fix it. And he was incredibly inventive and incredibly loyal and willing to do any amount of work. But if duct tape had been available in 1890, he would have used 3 rolls of it a day. He was forever pacing things back together. And he did that until 1940 and died on the job. But most of that time, he either had no assistants at all or one sort of home handyman janitor who would help out. And it wasn't until about 1940 that they actually hired him an official staff assistant. And so B.S. kept everything going. And what this meant with respect to the acetylene plant was that he had to come over sometime during the day, shovel out the wet, slimy crap that has been formed by dripping water onto it, make sure the water tank is full of water, and shovel in some new dry calcium carbide for the water to hit, okay? But it turns out once a day is not really enough. You really need to do this about every 6 hours. So if you do it at 3 in the afternoon, that lets you do the laboratories, okay? But by about 8 o'clock at night, you need to do it again. And he came over, he was living in Stagger Inn. You know where Stagger Inn is?
It's the basement of Venable, right?
No, it's the east end, the 4-story piece on the east end of Venable. Okay. He and his family were living in there by the early 1900s. And uh, he would, at night, get out and walk over to the acetylene generator, which was sort of in the basement of Memorial Hall, and tied it up. But sometimes he didn't get to it, particularly when the weather's bad. Now, if the weather's bad, this increases the number of students who are in the room studying. Okay, and somewhere around 8:30 or 9 o'clock, you run out of acetylene, and there's no gas coming out, and so everybody's room goes dark at the same time. And everybody knows what you need. You need B.S. Oliver, and he has somehow missed out on cleaning this up. Incidentally, here's the relationship of Memorial Hall to Cushing, and you can see there's kind of a little slope down there to the lower left corner. What they did was dump the slack lime out there, and there was a river of slack lime a couple hundred yards long going down to the gully and out the creek. Okay, the lake was not here, and we had a really messy yard then. But basically, they are close to each other, which is why it makes sense to, if you're going to have gas in one of them, it's not hard to put gas in the other one. But when the gas goes out, you need to notify BS. You can't call him. The college has a telephone, but it only has one, and it's in the president's office. Okay? The alternative is when the weather's bad, in January, when you got sleet and freezing rain, the alternative is to threaten a freshman until he puts his jacket on and agrees to walk over and tell BS to come fix this. But this is not popular with freshmen, and there ought to be a way to do this easier. Come on. Now, there are no buildings between Cushing and Venable. This is a picture that it was actually taken about 1855 or something, but it could have been taken in 1900. The Memorial Hall was off to the left here. There was nothing except a very open woods between Cushing and Stanger Inn. So, what the students did
What building is that?
this thing, here we go. Notice there are 45 windows in this building on this side. And the students arranged that when everybody's light went out simultaneously, which is what happened, they would come over to the south side, open all the windows. Everybody would lean out the windows, and somebody would count down 1, 2, 3, and then everybody would holler as loud as they could, BS, we want lights. The agreed upon phrase. And with 45 windows open screaming at you, you could hear this inside Stanger Inn. And they knew that good old Lionel BS would put his boots on and his heavy jacket on and walk over to Memorial Hall, and in about 15 or 20 minutes they would have lights again. So that was the way it worked, and it was understood that if you lived in Cushing, and basically you did at that point, you accepted the responsibility for memorizing the magic phrase. So there you are. Well, Tom Gilmer came here in 1916 as a freshman and lived in Cushing, and learned the magic phrase, and got used to that. But he was here in 1916-17, and in April 1917 we declared war on Germany. And Tom loyally quit college and signed up for the Army. And by the time there was some fumbling around getting ready for this, and by the time he got training and got shipped over there, it was the fall of 1918. I mean, a year and a half went by before you also had to take people over there in ships, okay? And we were going to send 1 million men to France by ship, thank you. And so that was not too fast. But the good thing about this is that he got there in late 1918, and he was there for armistice, but he never saw any battle. So here we are. We've had the armistice. Thank God the war is over. We got 1 million men that we now have to take back to the United States. And the most we can do is about 3,000 at a time on a passenger ship. So we can probably get this done in 6 months, something like that. But in the meantime, hey, it's spring in France. Go enjoy yourself. We'll approve any request for time off. Go do it, and we'll let you know when it's time to get on the ship and go home. Well, Tom Gilmore's from Southwest Virginia. He knows nothing about France or Paris, but he's with some other guys in his outfit who do know about France and Paris. And one of them says, look, let's get leave and go to Paris. I know some interesting places to go there, stuff to see. And so Tom loyally signs up, and about 20 of them go to Paris. And it turns out that what the guy has in mind is to get them all tickets to the Folies Bergère. Have you heard of Folies Bergère? It's a cabaret. It had been there for 30 or 40 years. Everything was musical. The entertainment was on stage. It was all musical. It had elaborate costumes and effects and things. But what it had in almost every show was nudity. If you look them up in Wikipedia, they have that delicately expressed. But the phrase was 50 beautiful girls, 49 lovely costumes. And Southwest Virginia does not have any place like this. And so Tom Gilmore was stunned when he was told what this was going to be. But they walked in, and it turned out they got really good seats. I mean, they were in the front few rows of downstairs. I mean, they were going to be like really close. And everybody sat down, and the house lights went down, and the gas lights on the stage came up, and the program started. And this was sensational. Whoa! And the trouble was that the Germans had shelled Paris significantly during the war, and not everything was in good shape. And about 20 minutes into the cabaret review, the gas footlights went out, and then the gas lights on the stage, and then the few dim gas lights that were on in the theater, and it was pitch dark. And everybody sat there for a minute maybe, and it was clear that this was not coming back on, not right away, and we were going to have to leave. And so Tom Gilmore stands up, and he's busy thinking how many seats he walked past to get into the seat he's sitting in. So how far does he have to go to get to the aisle? And while he's thinking about that, and everybody is shuffling around, there's a loud cry from the balcony, and it's somebody who is both loud and annoyed. And what he said was, BS, we want lights. And Doug, well, he told me this story, but it was in about 1965. So 40 years later, he said he never had found out who did it. But that's how gas lighting worked in Hampden-Sydney. And the only footnote to this is that we had a large acetylene generator going for 20 years, and we never had an explosion or a bad fire. Tribute to BS, I guess. But anyway, let's give up, and next time I want to talk about how Hampden-Sydney College wound up owning Venable Hall and all the rest of that down there. So anyway, thanks for coming, and see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.